back to the channel, and today is my video for spooky season. So this is my October TBR, but every October I like to change my reading a little bit. I like to mix things up and give everything a little bit of a horror vibe. So sometimes I still read fantasy, sci-fi and classics, but I might choose a few more atmospheric titles, or I might just throw some straight horror in there as well. I just like to mood read for the autumn mostly, especially October, and get things a little spooky. Now, I haven't bought any Halloween decorations yet. It is still a sunny September day at the moment. And in keeping with that, I am finishing a book for week 1 of spooky season that was on my September TBR. I'm going to be finishing The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. Now, it's Stephen King, and even though it might not be classed as a straight horror, it is certainly a kind of horror adjacent read. It is one of the elements of my extended Dark Tower read through, and I think that leading into October with a bit of Stephen King has worked for me previously. I'm planning to do it again. So I'll be reading the second half of The Talisman in week 1 of spooky season. Week 2 of spooky season is more about the classics. So I've tried to find some titles that are kind of horror adjacent or have a very atmospheric edge to them. Now, I have been reading from the complete Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this October, in week 2 of spooky season, I'm going to be reading The Hound of the Baskervilles. That classic, you know, it's very atmospheric. Is there a kind of a supernatural element to it? Obviously, we know at this point, most people know at this point what The Hound of the Baskervilles is, so I won't go into the spoilers there. But I think this is a fantastic early spooky season read. It's a way to get like an adjacent classic in there. I believe the version in this, because these are huge pages, very small font, very huge word counts per page on these. So I think it's just over 100 pages in here, but I know in paperback it's more like 200 pages. So it's a short novel, but one that I should be able to marry up nicely in week 2 with this. At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, I've been trying to read through Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. I already read Call of Cthulhu, which was a short story, The Dunwich Horror, which was a novella, and now At the Mountains of Madness is around 115 to 120 pages long, and it is right on the cusp of novel length, so they're kind of getting longer, these stories by Lovecraft in the Cthulhu mythos. And At the Mountains of Madness really kickstarts the real horror vibe of the month of October, and allows me to really get my teeth into spooky season. You know, we're getting towards mid-October. Halloween's around the corner. We've got H.P. Lovecraft on the go. Things are getting spooky for sure. Following that will be a short story. And that short story is by A.E. Van Vogt, and it is Black Destroyer. This has been on my TBR for almost a year now. It has been on a couple of TBR videos of mine, and I have been saving it for spooky season because it is the story that, or one of the stories that really inspired the movie Alien, a personal favourite movie of mine. And yeah, just the idea of having something that is kind of sci-fi horror adjacent in the mix for spooky season really works for me. I think it's only 36 pages long, so it won't take a very long time to read. I'll probably try to read that in one sitting and have a nice creepy evening. And then next in week 3, I'm looking forward to reading a recommendation for spooky season, and that comes from Cliff over at Cliff's Dark Gems. If you haven't checked his channel out, please go do so. It's spooky season. Where better to be than Cliff's Dark Gems, to be fair? And one of his books of the year was Skullface Boy last year. A author now that he considers in his top 10 authors is Chad Lutsky, and he's reading all of his books currently. But this is the book that really got him into the author. Skullface Boy is a coming-of-age tale about a boy who goes on a road trip in the 1980s to try and find someone else that has a skull for a face. It's a really bizarre concept. It's extremely, I mean, you know, if you can't fit a book like Skullface Boy in for Halloween, when can you? And that should lead me into Occult Detective October. So there is a reading event called Occult Detective October I know MJ and Roy, and there's lots of people. I think Greg might even be part of the crew over there. But they'll be reading about occult detectives in October. So for week 4, I'm going to do the same. Every fantasy fan's favourite occult detective is Harry Dresden, and I'll be reading Full Moon, and I'm just trying to figure out, what kind of like supernatural, paranormal, or occult stuff that Harry Dresden is dealing with in this kind of dark urban fantasy series about a private eye who just happens to be like a warlock or like a wizard. Yeah, I read the first book. It's kind of trashy fun. I expect similar from Full Moon. I do believe these books like really take off, but not for another half a dozen books, I don't think. So for now, I think this is just under 400 pages, so it won't be the longest read. But a good outro, I think, for spooky season. So that's my kind of reading plans for spooky season. Yeah, I mean, I would have already started The Talisman, and I'm not about to read the full Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. So not too bad for the page count this month. A little bit lighter, which is a good thing because I'm bookending this with some pretty heavy fantasy like Malazan and what have you. So yeah, really excited for spooky season. Please put in the comments below what your spooky season plans are. Do you usually mood read in October or the autumn generally, or do you tend to just kind of wing it? Me, I always love to slide a few extra adjacent titles in this time of the year, and I'll catch you in this video.